Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 230. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Rebecca Hendricks about her latest books, Hound Dogs and Hound Dogs Night. These first two books in Rebecca's new series follow a group of friends in a small town as they attempt to establish themselves as a rock and roll band called the Hound Dogs. The year is 1958, and rock and roll is just getting started. Rebecca's stories feature a harmonious mix of friendship, coming-of-age challenges, the notion of found families, the roles of women in that era, and, of course, the birth of rock and roll. She spent a great deal of time researching 1950s pop culture, as well as the various societal influences on the musical genre, including segregation, diversity, and the struggles facing young people. In this episode, I'll chat with Rebecca about her writing journey, why she sought to portray the 1950s more realistically than the candy-coated era we often see in television and movies, and her plans for the Hound Dogs in future books in the series, as well as a few other things coming up. Rebecca Hendricks, thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new series, Hound Dogs. You've got two books out, Hound Dogged and Hound Dogs Night. What I'd like to do is start by talking about the series in general and what inspired you to start writing it.
Well, actually, I wrote the book many, many years ago when I was 14. So I just had recently revisited the series. I just wanted to reread it for my own, fun, which is why I wrote in the first place. I wanted to rework the first book just because I never liked how it started, and I wanted to just do it for fun. But my husband ended up reading it, and he was like, "Wow, you've really got something here. You need to try to go for it." And so I thought about it for a long time, and then I decided, because he kept pushing and pushing and pushing. So I decided to go for it.
Well, we should thank your husband then.
Yeah.
For convincing you to do it. Good. Okay. Well, let's start with book one. Tell us a little bit about the storyline for this book.
The book takes place in 1958 in a small fictional town of Madison. It's your typical small town back in the 50s, where everything is pretty much, humdrum, if you will. Every day, stuff. Anyway, a group of four friends, well, starts out as five friends, come together and they form a rock and roll group. During the birth of rock and roll, it's a fun journey. There's some found family in there, and strong friendships and coming of age and all the things that come along with that. And so they come up against a rival band. Well, they don't start out as a rival band, but they kind of work their way into that when one of the band members of the Hound Dogs, who's going to ends up being a member of the rival group that dies.
And so Hound Dog introduces us to these characters.
Yes, right. Yeah, it really lays the foundation for the rest of the series.
Okay. And then you've got the second book out, Hard Dogs Night. Without too many spoilers, what will we see in the second book, Hard Dogs Night?
Well, one of the biggest obstacles or problems that the Hound Dogs have faced is they don't have a drummer. So they start the book out with their looking for a drummer. It goes a little bit more into the conflict between the Dice and the Hound Dogs when the leader of the Dice wants to steal a song from the Hound Dogs because they're getting ready to make a record. And the producers are wanting original material and they don't have any. So he just decides he's going to steal this song, which is what has started this whole mess to begin with. So it's just a continuation of that because there was a challenge and they were going to have a showdown, if you will, at the community center.
I want to talk about the characters in a little bit, but first let's talk about this setting because it plays such a big part in the books. It's almost a character itself.
Yeah.
What was it about this particular era that captivated you so much that you thought, okay, this story needs to be set here and it can only be told in this particular time?
Well, I don't know if it probably could have been told, like you were saying, probably any time, but I said it in the 1950s during the beginning, the birth of rock and roll, because that is such an interesting time anyway, because it was considered to be, evil and the devil's music. And, there was a lot of controversy that surrounded rock and roll when it first came out. And so that helped kind of add to the angst of the story with, a small town and, and things kind of blow up, if you will, at the end of book two. So I chose then because it was such a simpler time and there were such stringent beliefs that people were like, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And so just challenging some of those roles, like especially the roles for women in this book has been really great for me as a writer because I've learned a lot. Because when you look at the 50s on the basis, just the outside, it's supposed to be this like happy era. Everybody was happy and bobby socks and burgers and drive-in movies. But when you got to start to dig a little bit, there was quite a lot going on, and roles were beginning to shift, and women were beginning to think, well, hey, maybe there's more for me out there than just this.
What was it about the pop culture of the time? What aspects of the pop culture during that era did you believe needed to go in the book? What did you have to work to capture? Because and people see it on movies, and like you said, it's sort of this candy coated image of the era.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what was it about, really about that mix of advertised aspect of the era and the true nature of it for those who lived through it? Like what did you work to capture in the book?
I think the diversity, the struggles that a lot of the young people faced, especially with bringing rock and roll, playing rock and roll because it has its roots in the blues. And, the blues were prominently played by African Americans. And so I really wanted to bring that part into this, the role that all played. And actually there's a lot of that hints to that, but it really becomes really to the forefront in book three, that coming together of the races and fighting against the race card because, segregation was still a thing, which is sad, but it was. And so, just kind of having that starts coming forward with the ban of rock and roll that's being threatened to be put out there. So I just really wanted to try to capture that. I really wanted to try to capture the women's role thing. I really wanted to challenge that. And from a lot of the feedback that I've gotten, I did a really, really good job because it's made some women really upset because I did it so well. But, it's not the end of the story yet. And I am working very hard at writing a hopeful, uplifting story. So,
Well, I was going to ask you what feedback you've been getting from these books, because I imagine a lot of people reading it didn't live through that era. So I'm curious, what have people been saying to you? What have they learned things about it?
it's really surprising because a lot of people that did live through the era are reading it.
Hmm,
Yeah, it's been a really hard struggle to try to nail down an audience because it's all over the board, really. I don't even know if young people have even read it yet because I think a lot of people look at the covers and everything and think, oh, it's just about this, Bobby sock grease thing, and it's not that at all. But yeah, I've been getting a lot of feedback. A lot of people say this isn't what I expected. This is a lot different than I thought it would be. Um, and meaning that in a good way. And then a lot of some women got upset about the bringing to the forefront how women were treated back then. But I want to say here on your podcast, that's not the end of the story. Have to set down what it was like,
right.
be like. So
Well, what are your plans for the series? You mentioned that you're working on a book three. Do you have in mind sort of the whole arc of the series? Do you know where it ends and how many books that will be?
yes, I do.
Okay.
It was originally going to be three, but it's going to end up being four because I can't do justice to the story in just another book. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to cover. I do have multiple characters, which a lot of people find to be kind of rough to read through too. That is some more other feedback I've gotten, and now it's turned out to be quite the challenge for me as a writer to keep it all straight and going forward in a good way. So I won't do that again in my future. I won't have so many multiple characters running around because it's a lot. But I to me, I did it because I thought it would add some interest to the story. I thought it was interesting. I wanted to keep it like there's something for everybody, just some kind of different twist and about all the struggles they go through growing up and how they're at their strongest when they're together.
Yeah. Well, introduce us to the characters. Let's talk about the core members of the Hound Dogs first.
Okay, so like I said, there was five, but Patrick drops out pretty quick. He's probably gone by the fourth or fifth chapter. There's been the the dynamic of the group has been kind of like sketchy, and when they meet James, and he's a very good guitar player, he's very talented, things shift because Patrick has been used to being the talented one and didn't like the competition, and the other characters like John, the other co-founder of that group, is a free spirit, doing what he wants when he wants. Didn't wasn't taking it seriously. It was more fun, and Patrick was wanting to go to the next level. So there was that conflict. And so when they met James, he kind of changed it. And then you've got Stu, and Stu just wants to be famous. I mean, not famous, but he wants to be, popular, but he doesn't want to work at it. He doesn't want to work at being good. He just wants to be popular. So he's kind of a wild card type guy. And then you've got Jerry who struggles. He really wants to play guitar, but he's kind of slow at it, and he's has a smaller frame, and so his fingers have a hard time stretching to the chords. And I could attest to that because that's my problem. I have small fingers too, and it's hard when you have to move so fast. So he struggles a lot with that and memory, the memory part of it, like remembering where he's supposed to be on certain chords.
And then you mentioned Patrick moves over to another band. So you've created this.
Well, yeah, Patrick eventually ends up with the dice, yes.
And is there anything we should know about them? Anything other than the fact that this creates a bit more tension now for our band members who are already dealing with a lot?
Well, the dice are a group of narcissists. Really, they all think they're the greatest thing since, you know. And they're very well polished. They play the big venues. They have a big following. The leader of the group is very stringent, and when you become a member of his band, you will do what I say. You will stand where I say, and you'll learn the steps because they have little dances that they do, routines. And he's like, "You're going to learn these." And there's another character that ends up joining that group that's not him, and so there's that conflict. So yeah, and then there's Will, who's just all about Will, and then there's Boyd, who's the drummer, and he's a good guy.
So you mentioned that you play guitar yourself. Are you a musician? Does all of this just were you writing what you knew?
I try to be a musician, but I can't. I'm like Jerry. My husband was a guitar player, so he was, and I've always been attracted to people that play music because I can't do it. I can, but it's really bad and it takes me forever. But yeah, I've always been attracted to people that could play music. And I've always loved music. I just wasn't gifted with that quickness.
So I'm curious. You spend a lot of time setting the book in this era and really creating the whole atmosphere. Was this something you researched from whole cloth at the beginning when you had the idea, or was this an interest for you and you decided, well, I can put a story here because I already know a lot about it? I'm curious how much research you've had to do in these books, or was it something was it an interest of yours well before?
That's an interesting question because yes, I have always been attracted to the decade because I grew up with that music at home. My parents very much played and I've always loved the 1950s. And to be honest with you, I really thought I thought, okay, I'm writing a story about a small town and rock and roll. I got this, I know this. But as I got more further into it and started to look more into it, it's like, oh gosh, what did they wear? What was going on? And so I did. I started to dig more, and I'm kind of curious that way anyway, and I like reading about that stuff anyway, history and stuff. So I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. So I kept digging and kept digging and kept digging. And then, like the whole, finding out about rock and roll and where it came from and what inspired it is very, very fascinating and very interesting. So yeah, I ended up having to spend a lot more time researching, and I think in some ways I still am.
Do you find yourself, because you've written two books now and the third one is there, do you find yourself still going back and
Oh
researching?
yeah,
So it's a
oh
constant.
yeah, yeah. Or I'll forget something. I have a lot of notes, but I don't always remember everything. But,
Do you end up down a rabbit hole? Do you go to research
yeah,
one particular thing and then an hour later you realize you forgot what the
yeah,
answer was because you've looked at so many other things?
yeah, yeah. It doesn't happen so much anymore, but yeah.
But it's interesting because it seems to be a quality that the writers of historical fiction share. So of the authors who I've interviewed who write historical fiction, it doesn't matter the era, they all say the same thing. They have that ability to lose themselves in the research and the history. And the challenge is forcing themselves back to the story to actually get it finished. Do you find
Yes,
that that's true?
yes,
Mm.
yes. Although I do really love writing the story.
But the research
Yeah,
is pretty fun.
yeah, it is. It is fun. It's very fun.
Now, how do you feel about the editing phase? Do
Oh,
you enjoy?
I
No,
don't do it. Not so much, but it is what it is.
right, right. The necessary evil for a lot of writers.
Yeah, I don't enjoy it, but I think I'm getting better at it. When I first started, I was terrible, but I'm getting better at it.
I'm curious how you write because you've got a series and you have in mind how it ends and what you generally want to cover. Are you a meticulous plotter? Do you have outlines or something that you work towards, or is it just sort of a sort of vague idea in your head and you find yourself pantsing a lot?
I pants a lot,
Do you?
which is kind of not so awesome because that talk about leading to rabbit holes.
Mm.
So then I have to be very careful and be like, wait a second, come back, come back. You don't want to go there. You don't, because then now you're looking at a whole bunch more stuff. But what I really enjoy is like the times, like, as a matter of fact, it was last week, and I was just sitting there and I was struggling. I had been struggling with this part for quite a while, and I couldn't get what I wanted, and I'm like, gosh darn it. And one of the characters' name is Danny, and I'm like, what would Danny do? And I'm like, that's it. That's it. Oh my gosh. And then everything like just kind of just fell right into place. It was awesome. I was
Hmm.
like, yes. So I love those types of moments when you don't see it coming, and then you find it. That's what I like.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious what your plans are once the series is finished. And I know that's a lot of work to get from here to there, but are you already, is your mind already casting out past that, other story ideas, other things, other goals you have as a writer?
Yeah, I do have other ones that I would like to work on. I would like to maybe write another series, but like I was saying earlier in your podcast, maybe not so many characters. There are a few standalones I'd like to do. So so yeah, I do have ideas for the future.
How long does it take you normally to write a book? I imagine the first book took a while since you started it when you were 14. So when you sat down to start rewriting book one, how long did that take you? And then in comparison, how long was book two?
Well, book one. I had a skeleton for, like you said, and when I first started to rework it, it did take about a year because it was a lot of work because I had to learn a lot of stuff or relearn a lot of stuff. Like not to do certain things. Not to head hop, not show and not tell, and all that good stuff. And book two went pretty good because the skeleton for it was there too.
Oh,
But this one, it's really been kicking my behind because I didn't have the skeleton, and I have so many things going on, and it's just really it's really been a challenge. It's been over a year already, but I
wow.
work full time too. I should say
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's hard to rein that in.
that.
And is it, do you think even at this stage, because you said the original idea of three grew to four, is it possible that it grows even bigger? Or are you working hard to keep it just to four?
Working really hard to keep it to four. It could go on, of course it could, but
Mm. But you'll be satisfied with the character stories, you think, by the end of four.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you'll miss them when
Oh
they're
yeah.
when they're
Oh
gone?
yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if I kept writing just for myself.
Oh, your own sort of fan fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite among the characters? And I know that's hard because it's like asking if you have a favorite amongst children, your own children. But do you have one that you just really enjoy writing? You like that voice in your head, either because you just enjoy the character or you don't like the character's not supposed to be likable and they're just fun to write.
My favorite is John because he's everything that I'm not. He's carefree. He's doesn't care what other people think about him or say about him. He just is his own person. He's confident and he does what he wants when he wants to. And he'll say whatever. And I don't have any of that.
Those are sometimes the best characters to write. So now that you've got two books and you're working on three, looking back, do you discover that there are themes in the writing or messages or ideas that you kind of meditate on while in the writing that you didn't realize you were putting in there? I'm always curious what authors discover about their work after they've written it.
Hmm. No, I don't think there's anything that I wasn't expecting. Um, I, I mean, my books, I always try to keep them hopeful.
Mm.
This one's all about pursuing your dreams and being who you are no matter what. And then having the group of friends and have your back no matter what.
Is that idea something you always come back to, sort of like a grounding force in the story? Always come back to that idea as you're writing?
Yeah, because I try to give as much hope as I can. Because when people are struggling and having a hard time. I want this to be able to be a story of inspiration, to keep going, to keep, even when it's not popular, don't lose sight of who you are and what you want. And don't let society or, things like that weigh you down and you don't let that define your path and make you think you have to go a certain way. Be who you are. Because I think
Yeah.
a lot of times a lot of us get, smashed in a box. Like, this is who you're going to be. I mean, I know, like, for one thing, I was very creative growing up. I wanted to be an actress. I was an actress in high school. But, it was like, well, that's great, but you have to make a living, you
Uh,
know?
yeah. I'm sure that's a
So,
message all of us have heard at one
yeah.
time or another.
So, things kind of and it makes sense. And of course, it's the truth, but it just kind of squashes you down a little bit. And for me, it really, I mean, I think there's some people that can still rise above all that, but I wasn't one of them. But I have now.
Are these the kind of books you wish you had read back then, do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's nice then that you're writing them. Hopefully others will discover it for themselves.
I have had a few reviewers where they've been like, this has helped me, or
Oh,
this has
nice.
inspired me. So that's been nice.
Good, good, excellent. Well, let's see if we can't get more people interested in finding out about the books. So, if people want to learn more about you, the books, what you have going on, new releases when they're available, that sort of thing, where can they go to find you and that information?
Okay, so I have a website. It's RebeccaHendricksAuthor.com. I'm also available on Facebook and Instagram under Rebecca Hendricks Author.
And if people want to purchase a copy of either or both of Hound Dogged and Hard Dogs Night, where can they go to buy them?
Amazon. Amazon has both the ebook and the paperback.
Excellent. Well, Rebecca, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to wish you luck with the Hound Dogs series. We will look forward to book 3, hopefully in the not too distant future, and book 4 to follow after that. And congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far. Best of luck for the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you for having me.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.